country. We moved to a new country. I didn't know the language, but we felt safe. My mom says that I need to be at home because I need to take care of my younger brother, Ahmed, while Amir goes to school. I sometimes think he is maybe my mom's favorite. Maybe sometimes I feel left out. She also tells me that I need to do the house chores because my sister and my young sister and my brother, they need to go to school, and I need to sacrifice my time for them. I take care of my young brother whenever he naps. I play with my dolls. And think of my friends that were left behind when I left the country. Whenever Amir comes back, he's given the best of the meal. He is well-rested because my mom says that he works and studies. I also want to study. There was a school near our house in the refugee camp, but it's destroyed by the earthquake that just happened. But sometimes I think to myself, why do I need to justify my existence? First, starting with my parents. Then, I need to justify to be in school. I need to justify that I need the same amount of food to live, just like Amir does. I need to justify why I should not be left behind every time they move to a new place. I should not be married off. Why do I need to justify my existence? By now, you're wondering, who am I? I'm Zarghuna from Afghanistan, story of every girl in Afghanistan. I'm Amina from Yemen. I'm Amal from Syria. I'm Tasmin, a Rohingyan refugee. I'm all of these girls who were left behind, all of these girls who didn't have the opportunity, all of these girls who had to sacrifice their time, their food, and their livelihoods because their parents thought different, the society thought different. Now is the time you don't make me justify my existence. Now is the time that you don't take up my space. Now is the time that you let me breathe. Now is the time that you make that space. Now is the time that you let me welcome myself in that space where you all have been holding it off. Now is the time where I make the change, and now is the time I make this planet a more welcoming space for the next generation. Thank you. So after honoring all the amazing women in conflicts, all the young girls in conflicts, we want to go back to the audience. We want to engage more with the audience, so we're going to ask you a question. In 1 or 2 words, what will it take for girls affected by crisis access and complete, inclusive, gender transformative, quality education? So you can see, can I have the QR code? Yep. So you can go and check on the QR code, or you can go on the website and tell us in 1 or 2 words, what would it take for us to access complete, inclusive, gender transformative, quality education? And now we go back to Helen Grant, Special Envoy on Girls' Education from UK, and her video message. Sorry, it's taking more time than expected. I think I was fast.
Hello. I'm hugely honoured to be the UK Prime Minister's Special Envoy for Girls' Education. My role is to globally champion his message that providing 12 years of quality education for every single girl on the planet is one of the best ways of tackling many of the major issues facing the world today. Investing in girls' education is an absolute game changer. The child of a mother who can read is 50% more likely to live beyond the age of 5, twice as likely to attend school themselves, and 50% more likely to be immunised. Girls' education is therefore vital for women and girls, but it is also crucially important in levelling up society, boosting incomes, and developing economies and nations. Children living in emergencies and protracted crises are some of the most marginalised in the world. In the UK, we are committed to helping the most marginalised girls, ensuring that every girl, everywhere, can access the education that she needs to realise the opportunities. And this is why the UK is a proud partner of Education Cannot Wait. ECW is a proven model for delivering quality education to millions of vulnerable boys and girls around the world. Today, 222 million children are desperately clinging to the hope of going to school and realising their dreams of becoming a nurse, a scientist, a teacher. By committing funds to ECW, we can make 222 million dreams come true. So please commit. Thank you for listening.
All right. So without further ado, I really want to start with introducing our panelists. We have Kabita Bose with us, Country Director for Bangladesh Plan International. Then we have Saja Mohammed, who is Youth Advocate for Iraq Disability Alliance. We have Fajer, who is the Director for Pakistan Alliance for Girls Education. And we have Dr. Faith, CEO of Girls Not Brides. We have Genevieve, who is a teacher from Cameroon. And we have Taiba Rahim, who is the president of Naikala Association from Afghanistan. So I'm going to start with Kabita, you. I mean, I know that there is often this limited gender capacity is often identified as the key barrier in gender equitable, education interventions. Can you talk about your work and Plan International has been doing in partnership with ECW and to address this capacity within your experience?
Thank you, Pashtana. Thank you very much. Good morning to all. Before I respond to her questions, I just want to take a moment for all of us in the audience. Let us think about a girl of 10 years living in 10 feet by 10 feet shed or house in a camp settings who has taken refuge in a foreign land. Do you understand who she is? When the world has seen rapidly emerging new crises day by day, we cannot forget these girls and others who are already been affected. And the girl I described, her name is, let's say, Apple. Apple. Yes, she's Apple for her parents. She is a Rohingya girl, has taken refuge in Bangladesh, living in camp. According to her, she is invisible to the world because her rights of life, her rights of education, her rights of protection, her rights of dream is forgotten by her own country and as well as world. Plan's global vision is to stand beside the girls I described and also million girls who are affected by crisis. And with that commitment in support from the Education Cannot Wait, we are working for hundreds of refugee children, especially for girls in Bangladesh and around the world. Plan is recognized, as a gender-led organization because of its core work is gender transformative programming. The first step of capacity building is to ensure that we recognize the fact that girls, they do face multifaceted vulnerabilities and risk during any crisis and also normal time. In a refugee setting, girls often do not have a secure environment to move freely. Plan makes sure that these barriers to education is removed by bringing education to their doorsteps through home-based and community-based learning, which focuses on literacy, numeracy, competency on Myanmar curriculum. We also work with families, communities, government, and the peer organization to ensure that there is an enabling environment for girls' education. As a gender-led organization, together with Education Cannot Wait, we have prepared GenKit, which provides tools and guidance to conduct gender transformative program in crisis setting for our local partners, as well as our networks like Save the Children, UNICEF, UNESCO, to transfer the knowledge. In Bangladesh, we also identify potential Burmese teachers and build their capacity of Myanmar curriculum. The objective is to focus Burmese teachers so that they can learn the Burmese curriculum and they can foster their own life and dreams, and they can be integrated when they are back to their own country, that is Myanmar. But these initiatives are not adequate enough because what we are doing are very limited. We are reaching only less than quarter of the needs. Still, more than 75% of the needs are unmet. We need to remind ourselves in the audience that all the girls and women here, including me, in this conference room, would not be here today if we didn't get education in the lifetime of our lives. It means there is no gender equality without any education. Yesterday, we got very good commitment, but still, I would be asking a question to all of us, including us, an audience, and our global leaders, that to ensure all girls staying in emergency or affected by emergency and protected crisis have access to education, are we doing enough? Thank you all. Lots of loves, hopes, and dreams from the Rohingya refugee girls living in Bangladesh and also from the Bangladesh community. Thank you all.
Thank you. It definitely reflects on that question of like, we don't create emergencies, humanitarians don't, but the best we could do is make sure that are we doing enough? Are we doing our best in ensuring that all those girls in emergencies have access to education? Now I'm going to come to Saja. And Saja, I know in TESS last year, when in September, there was a lot of focus on ensuring that there is funding towards feminist grassroots levels in NGOs to ensure gender transformative approaches in education. I'm proud to say that I'm a feminist educator myself. Now, my question to you is, can you tell me about your experience in development of the Iraq MIRP to ensure the meaningful integration of gender and disability inclusion, and what impact this had on the investment?
So, bonjour, hola, hello, marhaban. About the education, people with disability didn't have the good education in Iraq, especially in emergency. So people with disability in Iraq didn't have including schools for them, and not just people with disability in emergency. Every kid in Iraq in emergency should have a good education in Iraq to go to be what he wants in future, because every children with disability or without disability have a dream. I also have a dream and wanted to achieve to go to my dream. So how can I go to my dream if I didn't have a good education, and including education? And if you know, education is like rain that fall on everyone, okay? And if we're talking about education, about people with disability or without disability, we should say no one left behind. We should think about every child in Iraq in emergency with disability or without disability. And also, we should thinking more about education for people with disability in Iraq. As you know, there were no accessible schools for people with disability in Iraq. So why we don't do accessible and including schools for people with disability in Iraq to make children go to their dreams? Because every children with disability have a power. You don't know that. Every children with disability, I'm continuous studying. And I see my friends in schools just stop studying because there's no schools for them. There's no schools. I kept them to continue study. So I just feel sad when I see them didn't continue study and they have dreams. They wanted to study, but they can't. And I am studying. I will be happy if I see my friends with me studying and go in the same college and go to be what we want to be in the future. As you know, we should do accessible schools for every person with disability, that's including them in the schools and be accessible for them. And in the end, every person with disability and without disability must prove his abilities and creativity, not given to disappear. You know why? Because the world needs us. And thank you.
Thank you, Saja. It definitely highlights the fact that we all talk about education, but we often forget the fact that when we talk about education, we talk about every child, every girl in all different ways and forms and in all different countries. So we need to make education accessible, but more importantly, we need to remember that every child is different and their needs are different. Now I'm going to transition more into a dialogue with Fajer. Fajer, I know that you have been meaningfully engaging with local women and girl organizations in education and emergency sector in Pakistan and the recent flood and everything. So can you tell me more about what has been your experience with the Pakistan MYRP development?
Thank you very much, Pashtana. Before I share my experience, I would really like to highlight the status of girls' education in Pakistan. More than 13 million girls are currently out of school in Pakistan. These are the girls who are under the age of 16. Nearly 85% of the girls drop out of school before completing primary education. Only 13% of the girls make it to grade 9, and only 1 out of 10 girls complete secondary education in Pakistan. And let's not forget hundreds and thousands of Afghan girls we have in Pakistan as well, who also need their right to education as well. So this is the status of girls' education in Pakistan, and this truly deserves everybody's attention. As far as engaging with the organizations are concerned, we believe that by simply providing access to education will not change the status of women in Pakistan, because we're dealing with deep-rooted patriarchal mindset, and it requires gender transformative programming, long-term gender transformative programming to address this. And this is why the role of local women and girl CSOs is so important. They need to be supported, and they need to be truly empowered to be able to reach out and help those who are in need. Because not only they can reach out, but they also have the understanding and the knowledge to how to overcome these cultural barriers we're facing. Now, Pakistan Alliance for Girls' Education was engaged by Education Cannot Wait during the design phase of multi-year resilience program in Pakistan from gender perspective. It means we had the opportunity to give our input in terms of how the gender component of multi-year resilience program in Pakistan should look like. And I believe this is one of the best practices that the donor community should follow. Consult local organizations, understand local needs and challenges, and then design your program priorities. It is sometimes, it's maybe, I feel at times when we're talking about gender disparity in Pakistan, it's maybe difficult and hard to understand the kind of situation we're facing. We're literally up against a society that seriously lacks understanding of gender equity. The gender disparity is so wide, it will take us decades before we have some normalcy, unless and until we push the gender agenda right to the forefront. And this is why we really need to support our local organization, women-led organization, truly empower them, provide them proper financing and flexibility to deliver an approach rather than high target programs, because what we tend to see is when these are donor-funded programs, we end up trying to meet these targets, and these programs just become target-oriented programs rather than working on impact. And before I finish, I would really like everybody to think about a class of girls in grade 5 that I spoke to, and I asked, how many of you are engaged to get married? And literally all 30 girls raised their hands. These are girls in class 5. And I want you to please think of a teacher that I once asked, what do you do to educate girls about non-traditional careers? And she said, I don't do anything. They're just going to get married anyway. Thank you very much.
It's definitely depressing to know that Fajer, transitioning into child marriages. I remember when I was 9 years old, we had this homeschool, and My name is Pashtana. We had another girl. Her name was Pashtana too. My father would say if I didn't study, he would just adopt her and let me out of be the house. So when she was 9, she was married off. And that was the story of every Afghan girl in Pakistan back then. Now, I'm going to come to Dr. Faith, and I'm going to ask her, I mean, you have done this amazing advocacy when it comes to child marriages and how to make sure that girls are safe from this disaster. Now, my question to you is, can you give us or share your good practices from humanitarian context? The education and emergency sector played a key role in prevention and response to child marriages.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for being in this room with us. I really appreciate all of you. But I also want to say before I answer my question that I'm sitting here on behalf of over 1,600 organizations working in over 100 countries who wake up every day to end child marriage. So I also want to honor them this morning. Before I go to the question, once again, I want to say how we define child marriage. In fact, we call it child early and forced marriage and unions. And this is marriage between 1 or 2 people where one of them is below the age of 18. And every day, every year, over 12 million girls are affected by child marriage. But we know with the current crisis, may it be COVID, climate, which we heard about this morning, and conflict, these numbers are increasing every day, threatening to undo all the great efforts which have happened in the decades before us. So I sit here in humility, but also encourage that we are having this conversation. Looking at the humanitarian settings, one of the things I know generally, and even when we talk about child marriage, is that we say that there is no silver bullet to end child marriage, but we think education comes close to the silver bullet, and we advocate for education for every girl all over the world, wherever they are. And when we think about the 20 countries with the highest levels of child marriage, 10 of them are described as fragile or extremely fragile, and 12 are experiencing extreme humanitarian crisis. And because of that, girls are really struggling. But in the midst of that, we have seen great effort and great energy where we are seeing some of these challenges being transformed. And I'm very delighted that the Minister for Education of South Sudan is sitting with us here. I honor you, Minister. And I want to acknowledge that South Sudan is where we are seeing innovation, whether it's the Loreto Girls' School, where they are asking communities, community leaders, parents, and even the girls themselves to sign commitment forms to say, I'm not going to drop out of education. It may look like a simple thing, but that effort has meant that 98% of girls are completing education. And that's a great effort to be scaled up all over South Sudan and everywhere, and we can learn from that. If I move on from the DRC, use of Democratic Republic of Congo, they are using radio programs to reach girls in remote areas. And you heard that gentleman from Nigeria talking about how radio programs are transforming lives. If I go on to Syria, they are using young women and young girls clubs so people can come together and learn skills and talk about child marriage. And last but not least, if you look at areas like Mozambique, there are girls who are going from home to home, educating and encouraging other girls to really stay home. So there are great practices, but the people we should never forget are the teachers. And we heard from Stella yesterday, because without teachers, and especially female teachers, because they play great role models for girls, because girls can see where I can be if I do not get into early child marriage. We also need to think about security, safety in schools. We also need to think about conditional cash transfers, because some of these people are not able to access education because they have no resources. I can go on. As I said, I'm speaking on behalf of so many people who wake up every day and work with me to end child marriage. And on their behalf, I want to say thank you, and let's do this. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Faith, for educating us on how it is for a young girl who is supposed to be married off and what could be done to prevent it. Now, we all know that child marriages happen, and then those young girls become mothers. So my question to Genevieve is, can you tell us from your experience the challenges that are faced by young mothers in Cameroon, and how are they being supported to continue their education as a young mother?
Thank you. Merci de me passer la parole et merci de l'honneur qui m'est donné de répondre au nom des jeunes adolescentes mères du Cameroun. Mais avant de vous répondre, j'aimerais vous dire que la plupart de ces jeunes filles mères sont issues des familles monoparentales ou vivent avec des grands-parents. Des grands-parents qui n'ont pas souvent le suivi ni la force nécessaire à l'encadrement des jeunes. Du coup, sans suivi, sans soutien financier, sans autorité parentale, ces jeunes filles sont laissées à elles-mêmes et une grossesse est vite arrivée. Du coup, j'ai envie de vous demander quelles décisions pensez-vous qu'elles vont prendre quand une grossesse est arrivée? Pour celles vivant dans des familles compréhensibles, elles peuvent penser à garder l'enfant, mais les autres, que pensez-vous qu'elles vont faire? Depuis 7 ans que j'enseigne dans une commune du Cameroun, à 128 km de la ville de Douala, je remarque que les jeunes filles qui sont laissées à elles-mêmes ont 2 choix. Soit elles mettent fin à leur grossesse, ou alors elles abandonnent l'école. Et en contexte de crise, aller à l'école devient secondaire parce que le plus important, c'est chercher de quoi manger et chercher surtout à se protéger. Pourtant, il leur est permis, lorsque ces jeunes filles tombent enceintes, de revenir à l'école après l'accouchement. Et c'est la famille qui s'occupe de l'enfant pendant que ces dernières sont à l'école, pour les plus chanceuses. Mais les autres sont obligées de laisser l'école et de chercher de quoi se nourrir et protéger leur enfant. Mais est-ce suffisant? Car beaucoup sont démotivés, car stigmatisés et abandonnés à elles-mêmes. Seules les plus courageuses continuent à aller à l'école, alliant garde de l'enfant et école. Les autres s'engagent dans des petits métiers pour chercher le pain et l'argent pour s'occuper de leur enfant. Car elles n'ont plus que ça comme rêve. Or, faire de leur rêve une réalité, c'est créer un cadre d'apprentissage prenant en compte leurs spécificités, prenant en compte leur réalité. C'est mettre un accent et faciliter l'accès à l'information, à l'éducation, à la formation, notamment à travers des structures de prise en charge pour elles, leurs bébés. Également un accompagnement psychologique parce que beaucoup d'entre elles n'acceptent même pas leur statut de mère parce que leur rêve, qui était certainement d'embrasser tous les métiers qui leur sont disposés, elles ne l'ont plus. C'est faciliter justement l'éducation à la sexualité parce que beaucoup encore n'ont pas accès à cette éducation à la sexualité et je parle des enfants, des jeunes filles dans les zones rurales. C'est également et surtout éduquer à la parentalité responsable.
I'm talking about education to responsible parenthood. Is the attitude of parents that take us to this situation, and that is what is making their future very difficult. A week ago, we lost a little girl in labor, and that was a shock. This is what happens. What happens with people who are underprivileged? They cannot have their dreams accomplished. That is the question. We should do everything we can for this not to happen ever again. We are teachers in the rural areas, and without you, what can we do? We are defenseless. We lost. There's nothing we can do. Our hope is lost. You are our hope. You, the governments, the ministries, the communities are our hope. All of us together, we can indeed implement every strategy we mentioned so that we should never have the little girls' dreams buried and lost along the way. Apologies for the absence of English translation for a few minutes.
Thank you so much, Genevieve, for those remarkable words. Now, I know we have talked about education and conflict, education when a girl is a refugee, education and good practices when they are brides or when they're on their path to become brides. How can we save them when they become young mothers? But now, I want to talk to Taiba. And, oh, normally I'm very loud, so never mind. Taiba, I want to talk to you. Now, both of us come from the same country. Both of us know that we have a country and a regime that right now is focusing on politically banning everything, and it has. We have no girls in higher education. We have no girls in secondary education. The girls are struggling with every way. So could you tell us about the actions the participants here could take, and the key decision makers here could take in this high-level financing conference to support Afghan women and their right to education, especially young Afghan girls?
Thank you very much. Is it clear? Can you hear?
Yeah.
Yes, thank you very much for this opportunity. Yes. Today in Afghanistan, the situation is very difficult. That I can say, the whole world talking about it. The solution that I can see from inside Afghanistan, that I'm engaged in leading an organization for women and children, is the international community. I called all donors, international community, states must engage, dialogue with current authorities, sitting with them, discussing with them, and listen and influence. Imagine me as a woman inside Afghanistan, as a president of an organization. For every single documentation, I sit with authorities at Kabul level, at provincial level, with every single authorities. I sit and influence them to obtain those documents for the moving forward those projects that for those women. Hundreds of women today, they are having salary and preserve their jobs. And as a only breadwinner in such a society that's shattered by war and shattered by poverty. And if I manage, so the international community should be able to manage and discuss. This is my one message. And my second message is that yesterday, I'm very proud and I'm very grateful that international community engaged and pledged with funding worldwide, also partly, hopefully, I'm sure it's for Afghanistan. In such a current situation, it's more needed than ever. But I would like to say a very strong message that make sure the international community that those funds, how it's being implemented on the ground, because it's not as that easy that it sounded easy, all those zeros that we saw yesterday. A lot of zeros, sounds good, feels very good, but how it's implemented. What do I mean by that? A small organization especially, we're a lot talking about localization, supporting women-led organization. Very rare few organizations that led by women remaining today Afghanistan, showing courage, showing a lot of courage to go and work in under current situation, and they should be supported. The courage is ours, but the funding is really, we need that. And that's that somehow empowerment that we can use those projects to knock the door of authorities and to meet them. And that's the influence of the authorities. I strongly believe the change has to come from inside Afghanistan, especially from women, that they are today banned from everything. And that's, I strongly believe, that this change has to come from inside, and we need those kind of moral and financial support from international community. And furthermore, when there is a women-led organization are being funded and supported, also the procedure, very often those small organizations cannot match those very high criteria of those funding. Yes, I agree. We have to fulfill those criteria, but for that we need capacity building. If those capacity building were not being trained, that we don't match those kind of criteria of those funding, then there is the localization means nothing, supporting women-led organization means nothing. Today, really, I call for all donors to make sure that those are implemented inside Afghanistan, those women are being empowered by those kind of capacity that we should match those kind of funding. Otherwise, exactly today what's happening, that today we are hearing the conservative society says, you see, the woman cannot manage. That's the question. This is my strong message. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Taiba, for that powerful message. I mean, definitely, the world needs to not only finance, but stand with us. Given that we don't have any political leaders, they have to step up. Now, can we go and review the Slido poll and the things that were given, the answers? Oh, okay, it's up. Okay, so I see advocacy, political leadership, and gender equality. I definitely do think all of those things are important and those are needed. And I hope the world leaders here and around the world who are listening step up, make sure that it's accessible to all the girls. If education is available, accessible to all the girls in emergencies. Now, without further ado, I would like to invite Antara Ganguly to the stage, Director of UNGEI.
Hi, everyone. There are two things about this panel that I want to draw to your attention. One, all my sisters sitting here spoke in stories. They talked about people. They talked about girls. And I think that's very, very special. Two, I have sisters here from my region. I myself am from India. I have colleagues here from Bangladesh, Pakistan, and Afghanistan. And I think it takes women to come together in this way for a cause. And I'm so proud to see that I have these sisters here on the stage. And I don't necessarily see that in a lot of UN spaces in New York. So thank you for reminding me of that sisterhood. From stories and pictures, I'm going to come to data. A report came out this week in the United States, the richest country in the world, from the CDC, from a nationally representative survey of young people that found that 14% of teen girls and 4% of teen boys reported rape in 2021. This is self-reported, and the CDC themselves said the numbers are higher. 33%, 1 in 3 of adolescent girls in the United States reported contemplating suicide, and 2 in 5 felt such persistent feelings of helplessness and hopelessness that they couldn't function for 2 weeks or more. Boys did too. Girls felt it, the figure for girls is double that for boys. In France in January, an independent commission on gender equality reported to the Prime Minister that 37% of young women reported that they had non-consensual sex, which to me is rape, right? And 25% of young men, 25 to 34-year-old men, reported that sometimes it's necessary to be violent in order to be respected. When I read these numbers, I reached out to colleagues and friends working with young people on the ground in developing countries. I reached out to friends in India, Pakistan, West and Central African countries, Somalia, and South Africa, and every one of them said that they think the figures, if collected sensitively and reported sensitively, would be higher in their countries. My colleague from Plant Somalia, Sadia Aline, told me yesterday that they actually know the percentage because they did a rapid assessment, and the percentage is 34%. Why am I talking about these numbers in these countries? Because if in countries and communities at peace, obviously I'm not including Somalia in that, we see these high numbers, why are we not talking about sexual violence more than we are talking about it in countries and communities in conflict? What are the numbers in humanitarian situations? Frustratingly, infuriatingly, we actually don't know. What we do know is that half of refugees internationally report PTSD, 50% report anxiety and psychological distress, and 1/6 have severe mental illness. These figures are for adults. We do not have this information for children. Yet, children are just as likely as adults, if not more, to be traumatized. They have witnessed rape, they have survived rape, and they have seen their loved ones and their support figures, their security figures, killed, cruelly often, callously. And yet, our headline in educating children in emergencies somehow does not include the word trauma. It does not include trauma-informed education. It does not include trauma-informed counseling. Too few of us are thinking about programming for mothers and fathers who themselves have survived traumatic sexual violence and therefore do not allow their adolescent daughters to go to learning centers. We know this. We know that they are writing their trauma on the lives of their children. And we need to help them to see that. We need to help them to stop that because nobody loves their children as much as they do. Today we talk about meeting children where they are when we talk about teaching them to read and write, at-grade learning. Why are we not talking about meeting them where they are when it comes to their hearts and their minds? Why do we not have indicators of recovery from trauma in addition to indicators for reading, for numeracy, and for literacy and numeracy? Mental health is not a trendy phrase. It's a human right. And it's perhaps the most practical human right because without being healthy, what child is even going to have the motivation to go to a learning center to learn? And even if they do learn to read, is that our job done? Is our job done? Even if that girl becomes a woman who is part of that statistic of rape, if that boy becomes the 25% that thinks it's okay to use violence sometimes. Education for children in humanitarian situations and protracted crises has to be trauma-informed. It has to be empathetic. It has to meet children where they are, their whole self, and not just the parts of their temporal lobe that deal with numeracy and literacy. And when we do this, when we teach children kindness to themselves and to each other, what are we doing for the world? We are creating a world that we adults do not have today. A world with less conflict, less displacement, fewer wars, and fewer natural disasters. Because when we reach out to children with humanity, we're teaching them about their own humanity, and we're teaching them to value that. We're teaching them to value each other equally. And when we do that, we are literally saving the world. Thank you.